Hey folks, hey, thanks for having me. So I like to give this talk to aspiring entrepreneurs because I find that this is one of the most powerful things that anyone can do as they're starting out with a concept or trying to get their startup off the ground. And unless you have a sales and marketing background, it can be a bit unclear how to try and get those first 5 customers. And so I like to demystify it and lay out at least, one opinionated way of doing it. There are many ways, but this is one opinionated way. And I try and lay it out as much of a framework as I can so that it can be easily replicable by you and whatever you guys are working on. So with that, let's dive in. You can ask questions at any point. I'm happy to pause and answer questions for clarification if it's helpful. So let's see, there we go. So just a quick comment on us. So our firm is Neotribe Ventures. We are an early stage firm. We make seed investments, Series A investments, and later stage investments. And to kind of put that rough numbers around that, we write checks anywhere from $250,000 up to $7 to $10 million, depending on the stage of the business. And our taste in our investments are really breakthrough technologies. We like deeply technical founders working on deeply technical problems in big markets. And I think one of the things that sets us apart is that we as partners at the firm are entrepreneurs at heart. Half of the early stage team are former founder CEOs. And so we understand the stage and we can share our notes and experiences to help founders get through those early stages. So let's talk about this problem. So the hardest part of early stage selling, the stage that many of you might be at now or might be at in the future, is that those first few customers are not really sold the same way that a professional salesperson working at IBM or Salesforce.com would go about doing their job. And in fact, there's this weird nuance where that early sales is really a combination, a hybrid of 2 very different practices. There's sales, which a professional salesperson does every day. And then there's customer discovery, which you may or may not have read about. This is a concept popularized by Steve Blank, where you're talking to customers to go learn more about their problem statements. Early stage selling is a combination of both. If you just do discovery, you're going to learn a lot, but you're not going to land customers. If you just do sales, you're going to presume that you have all the answers and you're just going to try and close people, but you're not going to learn and you're not going to iterate towards product market fit well enough. So it's really the hybrid that's powerful in the early stage. And so I'm going to walk you through 3 major concepts. The first is, let's talk about how customers buy. It's an important concept, I think. And so I like to make sure we're all on the same page of the buying process that every customer goes through. The second one is, and I think the hardest one is, let's talk about how we're going to do outreach. How are we going to get in front of enough customers fast enough, consistently enough to increase the odds that we land some customers? And then time permitting, we'll talk a fair bit about how to handle that first call with that customer to drive the conversation forward, not just towards discovery, but also towards what I call a qualified sales opportunity. So let's talk about how customers buy. So the most important thing in understanding how customers buy is that there are customers who need your solution, and then there are customers who have an active need for your solution. And the difference between the two is that people with active needs have made that need a high priority. They've decided they're going to do something about it, and it's a priority for them and their team. And in my experience in selling to organizations, at least, they really only ever buy things with an active need. All of the roadblocks and bureaucracy and hurdles that a buyer needs to go through to make a meaningful transaction in an organization are sufficient that just no one's going to do it if it's not a high priority need. And so as you're going out and talking to customers for discovery or for sales, my strong advice is to really focus in on finding customers that have an active need. Now, a question comes up often, which is, well, what if I find someone who just needs it? How do I get them to have an active need? I'll be honest with you. I've been in this industry since 2001. I don't know that I've ever moved anybody from need to active need. What I find much more effective is simply finding the people that are either already there, or the moment they see where you're working on, they get themselves to an active need. So let's talk about the process. How does somebody buy something? And I'll give a really good example, a simple example all of us have gone through. Buying a pair of shoes. If there's a morning where you woke up and you decided you needed a new pair of shoes. And what probably happened was, maybe you're putting on your old shoes and you realize that something's wrong with them. Maybe the sole's no longer strong enough, and maybe it's worn down. Or maybe, they're not as cool as they used to be, or don't match your outfit. Or maybe you were on Instagram and, Nike just happened to show you the new pair of Air Force Ones and you were like, that's cool. I want those instead. But something happened that got you thinking about getting a new pair of shoes. Some people call this loosening the status quo. And then once you got in the mindset that, you do need a pair of shoes, you went through a process that may have been very fast or very slow, where you thought through, okay, well, what kind of shoes do I need? Do I need running shoes? Do I need, leisure shoes that just look cool? Do I need hiking shoes? Like, what is my set of requirements? What am I really in the market for? And you start to understand your own needs. So you decide, okay, what I really need is just a really cool pair of shoes I can wear to school. I'm not going to go hiking with them. I'm not going to go running with them. I just need them to look really cool. And so then from there, you start going into an information search process. You went online, you start to look around at all the different shoes. You went to Nike's website, checked out a bunch of the shoes that they have. You went to Vans, you went to Adidas. And then eventually, after checking out all the different shoe options, you then tried to figure out, okay, well, here are the 3 or 4 shoes that I really like. There's a pair of Air Force Ones, there's a pair of Yeezys or something. And you got it down to a very small number. And then what you probably did, or probably might do, is you go order them online, or maybe you go to the store. And so you order those 4 from Zappos and they get shipped to your house, and you try them on, you see how they fit, you see how they look, and then you return all but one. And then you decide to purchase that one pair. And then you transact. Somewhere a payment goes through, your credit card gets swiped, or they run your number, and then you pay, and then you're done. You've bought the shoes. That process is not dissimilar from a large organization buying an enterprise resource planning system like NetSuite, or the government buying a nuclear power plant, or somebody buying a car. Most purchase decisions go through this process. Now, it may be immediate, it might happen instantaneously, and it might look like an impulse buy. Or it could be a multi-year journey, but most buying processes go through these steps. But in addition, most transactions that have any real size to them relative to the buyer's budget is unlikely to happen by an individual. It's almost always going to have a group of people, stakeholders, or what I call a buying unit, that have influence and different roles in the purchase decision. And so in an organization, there's going to be, the engineer who, is going to evaluate all the different databases and decide which database is for him. There's going to be the database administrator who may not have the purchase decision, but is for sure going to have influence over the decision based on the fact that he has to maintain it once it's in production. Then there's going to be that engineer's manager who might be the person who has ultimate say. And then there might be the VP of engineering or the CEO who has to make, who is the economic buyer. It's their budget it's coming out of. They may not be making the decision, but it's their budgets. They need to be made aware, and they need to be the approver or disapprover of the decision. Similarly, if you go into any household, 16-year-old kid wants to buy a car, they are heavily an influencer, but they're not the decision maker, and they're probably not the economic buyer. One of the parents is, or both parents. There might be other people involved in the decision as well. Maybe there's a grandparent who's chipping in. So understanding a buying unit is also really important as you are thinking about how customers buy and how to engage with them. The most important part of this as a seller is to understand who your champion is. And that's sales speak for the person who cares so much about the problem that you're solving, that they are selling on your behalf internally when you're not there. So if you're Volkswagen trying to sell a Jetta to a 16-year-old kid, your champion is that 16-year-old kid who is trying to convince the parents every day to get that Jetta. Or maybe, you're Volvo and you're trying to sell on safety, and your champion is actually one of the parents who want to make sure that their kid is really safe. Regardless of what the transaction is in any buying unit, it's critical to figure out who is at least one of the people who is so excited they're going to be selling on your behalf internally. And then you want to weaponize that person, give them a bunch of information, make sure they're happy, make sure they have everything they need, and arm them to go talk to the rest of the stakeholders when you're not there. Okay, so any questions on how customers buy before we dive into how to go find customers? Can't see anybody, so I don't know if anybody's raising their hands, but I'll assume that we're good. Okay, so let's talk about how we do an outreach plan.
We have one question in person.
Okay.
She's
Let's
coming
do
up.
My question was, how do you identify who the champion is when you're conversing with them?
That's a great question. Look, it's hard, but you feel it out, right? Again, think of a car purchase. Let's pretend we're all car salespeople, and a family comes in to buy a car. You can tell who's really excited. Who's the person who is asking the most excited questions? Who's the person who's giving you all the nonverbal cues that they're excited? Who's the person who might be pitching the car on your behalf while you're there? That person ends up being a candidate, if you will, for being a champion, but you end up having to really feel it out. One of the things that you want to be careful of is your champion is really important, but you also want to understand who's the person with all the power. And so you want to be aware of all the roles, because you want to be selling to everyone, but you want to be leveraging the champion. So if let's say the parent, one of the parents is clearly the one with the checkbook, who's clearly going to have ultimate say, you want to make sure that the champion is excited about the car. You want to make sure that the champion has the brochures and all the safety specs and has all the things that the parent really cares about and all the things the champion cares about, so that they can go duke it out when you're not there. But you also want to make sure that you're talking directly to the parent as well and understanding what they need and explaining to them all the things that they care about as well. Does that help? Like, you need to be selling to everybody, but you need to be arming the champion to sell when you're not there. Okay, so let's talk about how we execute an outreach plan. So cold outreaches to customers are really scary. And every single founder I talk to hesitates to do this. Nobody, I don't know anyone who likes doing this work. Even professional salespeople hate doing this work. So let's get that out of the way and talk about how do we go about doing it. And so there's three things that I think everybody needs. There's a foundational messaging, if you will, for yourself, which is just explain very clearly, what is it your product does? You're going to need that foundational messaging for everything. So just define it, explain it, and try and get it as simple and as short and concise as possible. Then we're going to construct a LinkedIn connection message. LinkedIn is a very powerful selling tool today. Almost every professional salesperson I know does most of their work through LinkedIn. I do most of my work through LinkedIn. So at least here in 2023, it is still a very powerful tool. Ask me in 2024 if it's changed. And then email. You're going to craft an email message, because email also still works. It is still the way that most people communicate in 2023. So the first one is the foundational message. What is it your product does? And I strongly urge you to get it down to a sentence and try and minimize the amount of jargon that you put in it. Try and explain it as plain as humanly possible to your audience. Now, you're not going to be able to completely get away from some jargon depending on what your product does and who the audience is, but try and keep it so that if you're to talk to your target buyer, the chances of them misunderstanding it is low. So here are a few examples that I've worked on. So there's a company called Cobbler that I'm an investor in. It's also, full disclosure, my wife's company. And Cobbler automates budget variance analysis. This is not a sexy definition, but if you go talk to a CFO or a VP of finance, they understand immediately what this is. Product that I worked on before I became a venture capitalist was the Okta Access Gateway, and that product extends authentication to on-premise applications. Right? My own company, Stormpath, when I was an entrepreneur, gives your developers out-of-the-box authentication and user management. None of this stuff is going to win a prize for advertising and wordsmithing, but it is very clear to customers, and so you don't have to spend a ton of time explaining what this stuff is. And so I urge you to try and think through what that is for your product. If it goes more than 2 lines, it's too complicated. If you can get it down to 1 line, you're winning, and then I would for sure test it against your audience to make sure that they understand what it means. So with that, you then go build a LinkedIn connection message. This is a very, very short, 1 to 3 line statement to reach out to people that you want to talk to, the people that you believe are going to be your target audience, and get them to take a meeting with you. And so here are 2 that I've written. One was for Cobbler, and one was what I wrote when I was a student coming out of Stanford with the company concept of Stormpath, and we were doing initial discovery. These are 2 very different approaches. I'll let you read them for a second. So what you'll notice in both approaches is the first one is about the product. Hey, I'm building this thing. Here's why I think it's interesting. I'd love to get a meeting with you, and maybe here's a quick offer to give you access to it. But you're making it about the product. And if your product, if you already know there's a little bit of tug and demand for your product, or you have a pretty good idea of what your product is and the value of it, for sure, test this kind of message. Alternatively, maybe things aren't that fleshed out. And the real selling point here is that you're a CMU student. And for me, that was a very powerful selling point. I was a recent Stanford graduate. Everybody wanted to help me. And so I made the message about that. I'm a recent student. I'd love to pick your brain on this stuff and get your feedback. Either one works. Test them, see which one works best for you. So then you have your email formatted version. This is a longer format. You're probably getting 2 to 3 paragraphs, very short paragraphs. Keep it small. People don't like to read, but just a blown out version of the same thing. And by the way, this is a real email. This is the exact, I copy and pasted this from my original email that I was sending when I was a recent grad. And to be clear, this email is to Paul, at the time, the global CIO of Boeing. I cold emailed the global CIO of Boeing, and they eventually became my first customer. So this is an email that actually converted. And again, similar concept, recent grad, here's what I'm working on. I'd love to get your feedback. Can you share 20 minutes? Flipping it around to the Cobbler use case, where we're making it about the product, and we have a stronger view of what the value proposition is, we have this one. This email is also a real email that converted the first customers of this company. So both of these are real emails that worked, but both of them are very different. One's about me as the student and the entrepreneur, and the other one's about the product and the value proposition. I would play with both, see what works. And then once you have these tools in place, the next step is to go build a list. So if you talk to any professional salesperson that does outreach every day, like a sales development rep, SDR, BDR kind of role, they're building lists all day long. And so my favorite tool to build a list is a tool called LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's not free, so you have to pay. but it is the de facto tool for most sellers. And you go in here and there's all kinds of filters to go find the people you want. And then there's a bunch of buttons to go create the list that you want. So you go in and let's say I want to find all the chief information officers in the United States for companies between this size and that size. You can build that in here. And then once you have that list, my suggestion is to build a list of about 50 targets at a time. No matter what filters you apply, you're going to end up finding way more people than you can ever really go through. And you can go like 1,000 or 5,000. Keep yourself sane and just bite it off 50 at a time. So create that list of 50 that fit as close to what you think your buyer community is going to look like. You know, maybe it's CIOs, maybe it's heads of AI, maybe it's you know, facility managers at an elder care facility, maybe it's you know, radiologists, you know, whatever you think your buyer is, create that list, start with 50. And put a little wiggle in it, right? If you think that it's all radiologists, you know, maybe you try imaging centers, right? Who aren't radiologists, like try and put a little jitter in the data to kind of create an opportunity for you to have a little bit of luck and new learning beyond what you think. And then as you go through this list for each one, as you're going to reach out, do some research, personalize it. You know, if this is the CIO of Duolingo, do a little bit of work. How long have they been there? Have they announced anything in the last few weeks? Have they made any public statements about where they're investing, what the priorities are for Duolingo? Would this person go to CMU? Do you have any affinity with this person? Whatever it is, try to the degree that you can to tailor and personalize the message so it doesn't look like spam and you look like a real person who is legitimately trying to get a meeting with them. And this is the hardest part, is dedicating 4 hours a week to the outreach. This work sucks. It's a grind. Like there's no sugarcoating it. And so the best way to do it is to just dedicate time every week to hitting people on that list, to writing the emails, to sending them out, to doing the follow-up. Because if you don't dedicate that time, you're just not going to do it. And you're not going to get enough pipeline. So this is an activities game. This is a numbers game. And you don't have to do it all purely through direct outreach, right? You can also leverage your network. You'd be surprised how powerful your network probably is. You have fellow students who've graduated, you have family members who might know people, you have friends of friends. Work whatever network you have to help in whatever way it can. If you get to a place where you've raised money from investors, your investors can typically be a pretty good source for network as well. So you can always ask them for intros where they have them. But then again, I think that doing direct outreach through LinkedIn connections or email are the easiest to just execute yourself and have agency over. And yes, phone calls still work. And so if you do get someone's phone number, don't be shy, pick up the phone, try and get a hold of them and see if they'll give you a call. And then sending out these emails is like step one. Most people are not going to respond to you on the first email. Dude, I'm a venture capitalist. I'm selling money. And most people don't respond to me on the first email. Most of the responses happen in the follow-up, maybe the second or third, and in some cases, the fourth email follow-up. And so you want to make sure that you are scheduling out follow-up emails and follow-up messages just to make sure that you're not getting false negatives. Most people will eventually tell you that they will or don't want to meet if you keep following up a lot. Most people aren't just going to go dark on you if you keep following up like 4 times. But then eventually, after a few weeks of follow-up, even if somebody hasn't responded, you can drop them from the list. Cycle them out of the 50. If someone hasn't responded over the course of 3 or 4 weeks and you followed up 4 times, remove them from the list, replace them with somebody else from LinkedIn. And then because this work sucks, and it does, you want to figure out a way of rewarding yourself. Make it a game. Whatever's going to get you to feel good and that you did the work and is going to keep you coming back. And this sounds a little silly, but it's really important. And if you ever walk into a professional sales floor, you're going to see all kinds of weird things happening, right? There's going to be a gong getting hit every time someone closes a deal. There's going to be leaderboards. There's going to be a bell getting rung for some other thing. Like there's all this like manufactured reward happening in a sales team, in a sales department for this very reason, because it's really hard work. It can be a grind to hear a no all day long. And so they go above and beyond to reward themselves for the yeses and simply doing the grind. You have a question?
Yeah. How do you think about prioritization? I would imagine there may be some targets that are high on your list and you don't want to sort of blow it with your first, while you're still experimenting. So are you kind of like targeting maybe some mid or low priorities first to kind of work things out, or how do you think about that?
That's a great question. I would urge you to not do that, to just hit everybody, because I'll give you an example. Maybe you want to talk to Goldman Sachs, but you're scared that first conversation with Goldman's going to get blown, and so instead you're going to go try talking to, I don't know, whatever a small regional bank is in Pittsburgh. The problem with doing it that way is that small regional bank in Pittsburgh is different than Goldman. And so you might get some information from that small regional bank that validates or invalidates your concept, but that has very little bearing on whether or not Goldman is going to validate or invalidate, because they're materially different organizations. And so I wouldn't do that. I would just go hit whoever you think it is the right people. And in fact, I would hit whatever you think is the highest priority, go hit them. If you're in a good market, there should be enough high priority targets where you can screw up the first few if you absolutely can. But the good news is that there's actually going to be a bit of a selection bias that's working in your favor. If somebody is, let's call it patient and flexible enough to take a call from an entrepreneur who still hasn't figured anything out, that meeting's unlikely to go poorly, right? They may not validate your idea. They may tell your idea is stupid, but like they're not going to like get upset with you and burn the bridge, right? Because they took the call knowing what it was. And so there's going to be some built-in patience in the people that take the call. If someone's really touchy and expects you to be this fully formed organization with 37 references in the Fortune 500, that person's unlikely to take the meeting to begin with.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So this framework is really straightforward. Like, this is not rocket science. This is just really hard. And so the trick to it is to make sure that you are dedicating the time, making it sacred time, that you are not going to reschedule, you're not going to book over, and just sitting down at the computer and grinding it out. But I promise you, if someone has done this many times, as you start to grind this out week over week, the first few weeks are going to feel like nothing's happening, but then eventually it starts to work and you start to build a pipeline of calls and meetings. And so be patient, grind it out, and just make sure that you're finding ways of rewarding yourself in whatever way is going to work for you. This topic that I've only had a few slides on is actually a very big topic. And so the degree that you want to learn more about what people call prospecting, there's a wonderful book. It's not the best written book in the world, but it's a very good book and very accurate that most salespeople have read, called Fanatical Prospecting. This is a book, actually, I hand it to every entrepreneur that I fund. Along with my check comes this book. Because I'm such a big believer in founders doing their own prospecting outreach. Okay, so you've reached out to 50 potential customers. A handful of them have said they'll take a call with you. So all of a sudden, you're scheduled to go talk to somebody. I don't know, some director of IT at a local bank, for the sake of argument. What do you do? How do you handle that first call? And so the most important thing is to prepare. And so when I started my career, I started my career in sales at IBM. I worked there for about 4 years in my early 20s, and they had this great quote that just beat into your head in sales, which is failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And so they beat into our heads to always prepare for every sales call. Now it's really basic, again, not rocket science. Do some research, go see the person you're meeting with, where they come from, how long have they been in a role, what do they put on their LinkedIn as their accomplishments and the work that they do, how's that relevant to what you're doing? Are there any public releases, any statements that the company has made about their future, the things they're dealing with? Go read, if they're publicly traded, go read their 10Ks or their 10Qs. They're going to talk about their strategy, and just anything you can find. And it's, between LinkedIn and Google, you can find out a lot about any organization and some people. And then set an objective for what you want to happen in the call. Be really clear. What's your goal? Is your goal to just ask questions and just learn about the market? Is your goal to see if they want to be a design partner or a pilot? Is your goal to close them and get them to be a paying customer? Is your goal to simply have them refer you to somebody else? Whatever it is, just make sure you're clear with yourself on what that objective is so you can manage the call towards that. And to that end, you want to prepare to manage the call. And so you want to think through, what are the possible objections this person might throw in my direction? What are some of the challenges that they might highlight towards working with me? And then think through all those, and then think about how you're going to respond. If someone says it's too expensive, what's your answer going to be? Are you just going to say, well, no big deal, I'll discount it? Or are you going to say, well, I'm going to explain to you why it's, why it is so valuable and why the price justifies it? Or are you going to turn it back on them and understand why they think it's expensive and what their budget looks like? Whatever it is, just run through it. For any of you who've ever played, a sport at a very high level, like a varsity sport or at the college level, one of the things that's really common is, professional athletes or really high-end athletes, they visualize the games before they play them. They visualize, soccer player visualizes how he's going to pass to his teammate. He's going to run it up the field. He's going to dodge and juke the defender, and he's going to go kick the ball and score. He visualizes all of this before the game even starts to get themselves in their mindset ready for the game. The same is true for what you should be doing for one of these calls. Visualize it, walk yourself through it, and then when the real call happens, your brain's a bit more ready for the bobbing and weaving that typically comes with these calls. Okay, so then you're in the call. There's if you followed anything by Steve Blank, there's this concept of a customer discovery process. And I like to do these calls using that framework, even though we have a sales intention, because this is early sales, which is a hybrid of discovery and sales. I like to start with that framework. And so to me, there's this 3-step conversation. The first step is to try and understand the customer's problem. This is not dissimilar from what professional salespeople do on a first call. The difference is, instead of you asking the customer what their problems are, which is what a professional salesperson might do, you're instead going to lay out the problems you think they have, because you're trying to validate your understanding of the market. Because you're so early, you don't really know if you understand the market the right way. And so say, hey, Mr. Customer, you're a regional bank, and you have a call center that's fielding this many calls or some number of calls every day with your customers, and you have these 3 problems. You have a quality control problem where customer satisfaction isn't as high as you want it to be. This call center is very expensive, and so you're spending a lot more money than you really wish you were for the value you're getting. And then you've got really long wait times for customers, and these are the highest. These are like the problems you're thinking most about. And then let the customer respond to you, and let them check to see, is this the right problem statement? And they might say, no, I don't really have long wait times because we manage this pretty well. So that's not really a problem for us. What we really have is, we have a problem with internationalization. We have customers all over the world, but our call center is in Montana. So when someone calls in and they don't speak, English, we have a challenge. So let them correct you, let them add things or modify things or add color, or invalidate your understanding. This way, as you have more and more calls, you're getting smarter and smarter on your problem statement. The next one, and this is challenging for a lot of founders, because you want to believe that your idea is the best. You want to understand the alternative solutions. Say, okay, well, how are you solving this today? I think today you're solving it by, homegrown system that your internal IT team has built. And here are the problems with that. It's really expensive. It's hard to maintain. It's, you just aren't really happy with it. Alternatively, you can buy a system from salesforce.com, for their support cloud that does all these things. The problem with that is that it doesn't really work in the environment you have, and it's missing these critical features, and it's really expensive, whatever. Then you go through all the different solutions that you think the customer has, and you try and understand if those solutions are good enough or not. Similarly here, let the customer correct you. Let the customer say, yeah, that is a real problem. Here's why it's a problem. Or, hey, you know what? That solution is not really a solution we really explore. It's not a real solution. So we don't really consider that a solution. Or, hey, solution 3, yeah, that's great. We actually are really happy with that solution. Again, you're not trying to convince the customer of anything. You really just want to make sure that you're understanding the landscape as well as humanly possible by soliciting this information from them. And look, if somebody is pretty happy with the set of alternative solutions, that's important to know. And if enough customers are telling you that they're pretty happy with solution 2, that should be a pretty big factor in how you decide to move forward with your startup. Obviously, nirvana is where everybody's, is absolutely solutionless, and no alternative is as good as what you're going to propose, which is the next thing. You're going to propose your solution. Now, again, this is really different than how a traditional salesperson goes through it. But again, we're really in discovery mode here. And so here, you're going to start to walk through your product, and you're going to explain how the product works. You're going to go feature by feature. You're not trying to convince a customer of anything. So, don't go into sales mode. Be like, okay, look, I've got this call center automation system. It's heavily based on AI. And so the way it works is customer calls, we pick up the call, our automated voice is going to have an interaction using GPT, and it's going to try and sound mostly human. And then, based on what we hear, we're going to transcribe it, and then basically going to go through this entire logic to handle their request. And if at any point there's like a 3-second delay and the customer feels like they're struggling, we're immediately going to tap out to a human to take the rest of the call, right? Like whatever it is. And you're going to list out the major features and how the product works. And if you want, you can give a demo. But then again, similarly, you're going to ask the customer how much this matters. Hey, if we do it this way, like, is this important to you? Does feature 1 really matter? Why does it matter? Does feature 2 really matter? Why does it matter? Does feature 3 matter? Why does it matter? And similarly, you're not trying to convince them, you're just trying to validate. And you're going to hear customers tell you that feature 1's amazing, right? That's super important. And they might yawn at feature 2 and 3. They might tell you that feature 2 is completely untenable and they would never, ever use something like that. Whatever it is, you're trying to get as much information out of them as possible so that you can start to do product planning and product definition. So this is straight up traditional customer discovery framework. But the difference now is we're going to turn, based on how this interaction went, we're then going to start turning this into a sales call. And the way you do that is that at the end of your explanation of the product, you're going to ask the customer if they would pay you a lot of money. So, would you pay me $1 million for this? Now, again, the $1 million number here, I'm putting in here for effect. You want to throw a big number out, a number that is at the edge of reason, right? And maybe it's $1 million, maybe it's 100K. I'll leave it to you to have a sense of what the edge of reason is, but it's a number where you expect to hear no, but not be laughed out of the room. Because you want them to say no so that you can immediately follow up with a question of, well, what price would make sense? Now, conversely, if you throw a low number out, hey, would you pay me $10,000 a year for this? The customers might say just yes. But the problem with the yes is that you don't learn anything. Because again, remember, we're still on a hybrid of discovery and sales. So if they just say yes, you didn't actually learn what the value was to them or how they think about it. But if you throw out a big number and they say no, but then they engage with you on what price would make sense, you're going to start to hear, well, this is how much I pay for this. This is how much I pay for that. And here's the return on investment argument I'd make to my manager. So I wouldn't pay $1 million, but I'd pay like 70,000. And here's how I got there. That is gold. And so whatever they start to tell you, start to explore, get really curious, dig into it. Now, some people are going to have a really hard time telling you what they would pay for it. Maybe they just don't know. Maybe they themselves don't own the budget. Maybe it's an engineer and the engineer has no idea what the organization might pay for this. Or maybe it's somebody who's just really uncomfortable giving you an answer for whatever other reason. Or maybe the answer is, maybe they may or not tell you this, they wouldn't pay you for it, right? But regardless, if you see someone struggling to give you a number, you can always flip the question around and be like, okay, well, what if it were free? Would you adopt my product and use it for real if it were free? Now, this question sounds crazy because, well, you would think most people are going to say yes, but most people are going to say no. And the reason is, in particular in organizations, the price of a product is a small percentage of the real cost. They need to train people. They need to do change control. They need to integrate to other systems. They need to prioritize it against other work that's high priority in the organization. And so even if your product were free, there's still a really important signal to be picked up on whether or not a customer values it enough to integrate it and adopt it and train their teams on it. So if you get through all of that, you're now kind of at the end of the call. And hopefully you've been reading the room. You've been trying to get a sense of, is this person excited or not about what you're working on? And if you get that there is a degree of excitement, we're going to engage on next steps. But look, if someone is clearly not that interested, they didn't validate the pain points that you thought they had, they're pretty happy with their solutions, you showed them your solution and they just didn't really get excited, you ask them how much they would pay, they say, look, I don't really know, this isn't really high priority for us. Hey, what if it were free? I don't really know. Again, it's not a high priority for us. I don't know if we would, where we prioritize against other work. If you kind of get to that place where you're just not getting any buy signals, it's a dead end. And that's okay. That's going to happen a lot. Thank them for their time. Be really polite, but get value out of the call. And the way you get value out of a dead end is you ask for introductions to other people. Hey, this is awesome. Do you know anybody else in the banking customer support industry who you think would be good for me to talk to learn more? And then see if they give you more names. And then you add those names to your list. And that list is a little bit easier because now you can reference that Joe at this bank, referred you or introduced you. So it's a little bit warmer of an intro. Now that's if it's a dead end. Now, if someone actually seems interested and they say, yeah, we have this problem. And yeah, our solutions do kind of suck. And I don't really know how much I pay you, but we're really interested in this solution. I could see why this would really help us. Then you go into like real sales mode, right? This is where you take everything you heard, you summarize what you heard, you play it back to the customer to make sure that you understood properly. And then you clarify very specifically why you believe your product can help. So this is where you're kind of pitching a little bit. And then you have to propose becoming a pilot customer. Hey, Joe, it sounds like we can help you with all of this stuff. Here's what I heard you say is the value. And if we did A, B, and C, this could really be impactful. Hey, look, we're an early stage company. And we're looking for early pilot customers. Would you be interested in being one of our pilot customers? And see what they say. And they might say yes, they might say no. But if there's any kind of interest on that front, say, propose the next meeting. Hey, that's awesome. You're interested. I'd love to have a follow-up meeting. In addition to yourself, who else is involved in this kind of project? And why don't we get you and them on a call and we'll do a deeper dive into what it is we're building, maybe with a demo or a whiteboard or whatever you have. You're going to explain in a lot more depth what your product is. Or if you don't know enough yet about what they're doing, maybe you just go into that call just to explore more deeply what their use case is. Whatever you think the right next deeper step or escalation of commitment is, make the ask. So everything I've walked you through is pretty much all you need. This stuff is not rocket science. It's really just a grind. And so it takes some grit. A framework can help, keep you focused, but ultimately you should find the time to do it. And so based on everything we talked about, hopefully you now know how to figure out how to target your target buyers and try and identify champions and what champions are. You now saw hopefully how to build a target list on LinkedIn, and you have a playbook, at least a playbook from my opinion, for how to do that outreach to that list. And you have an opinionated approach based on customer discovery for how to run that first call. The most important thing to do, if this matters to you, is to get out there and practice it. You're going to get better at this the more reps you get in. And the more and more calls you have, you're going to see places and areas to iterate. You might change how you talk about the problem statement. You're going to change how you talk about the product. You're going to change who you target. But all of that happens as you get more and more data points. So happy to answer any questions that you guys have that we haven't already covered.
Hey, Alex, I was wondering if this slide is going to be available somewhere, like the deck that you just shared.
Yeah. I'll make it available. I'll email the team and let them distribute it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Alex, thanks so much for this talk. So I just had a question. So when you approach the customer and you have something that you're working on already, so you don't want to, just to clarify, you don't want to be explaining your solution first, just so that they don't, and sort of getting feedback on that in order to prevent any bias from them, and just sort of ask open-endedly, what is the problem that you're facing? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So yeah, in the early days, that's how I like to do it, because look, even if, let's pretend we were professional salespeople already at a big company like IBM. In a first sales call, we still wouldn't be going in hard and heavy on the product. Even in a first sales call in a professional sales team, we would spend that first 30-minute call doing discovery. Well, sales discovery, not customer discovery. We'd be like, hey, what are your priorities for the year? And hey, how are you doing this? And how are you doing that? And is that a problem? And so even professional salespeople start the calls off trying to unpack the problem statement. And so you want to do the same thing. The difference between professional sales and what you're doing is that you're also trying to validate your understanding of the market problem. And so you're laying out your hypotheses to get them validated or invalidated. A professional sales team typically isn't doing that because all of the stuff is already really baked, and somebody in marketing has simply handed them, a document that tells them what's true and what isn't. You're not there yet. But yeah, I would not go hard and heavy on the product until the end. And in fact, if someone wants a deep dive into the demo and the product, that's awesome. That's your hook for a second meeting.
Got it. Thank you so much.
I have one more question, Alex. So through the discovery process, you'll learn, some of the other features that people might want. But if you're bootstrapping your company, and you're paying sort of developers out of pocket and whatnot, what are like some options, like, I guess would you offer, a part of the service, because if you have, let's say, a product and a service side, would you do it sort of manually to begin with, and then, use the solution as things progress?
Let me make sure I understand the question. Is the question like, how do you deliver, your offering to a customer when you're bootstrapped?
Yeah, well, sort of, yeah.
Okay, well, let me separate two concepts. So
yep.
You're trying to validate in this framework, in these calls, is the business you want to build, regardless of what you have, right? When I was going through this, when I was in your shoes, I had no product. We had written maybe like 100 lines of code. Like we didn't have a working product. We had PowerPoint slides. And so you don't worry about the state that your product or service is in. What you're trying to validate is what it is you're actually trying to get to. And so, if today it's a hamster, on a wheel behind an API that's not real, that's okay. It's really where you're going. So that's my point there. Go validate that. Now, if when you're trying to get a pilot to be your first guinea pig, if they're excited about where you're going, in a subsequent conversation, you might choose to lay out where you are today and how the service will be delivered. That's up to you. And so if you've got an AI service, but the truth is the human in the loop is doing 90% of the work for the first 6 months, you may or may not want to disclose that depending on whether or not it's going to impact their experience. But your early customers are more likely to be flexible and patient because they know you're a startup, right? You're not going to land Goldman Sachs as one of your first customers. It's just it's not going to work. You're likely to end up landing somebody in the mid-market who's really patient, and they're going to expect your first offering to be a bit janky. Not that it should be janky, it's everything you do. You're going to not to make it janky, but they're not going to be surprised.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Alex. Thank you so much, by the way. It was amazing. I had a question about the asking questions philosophy during customer discovery, where it's better to kind of allow the customers to correct us in that way or add or modify what we're saying. But I was really curious about how that plays out when let's say, if we're going to point out to 3 solutions that we think they might be using and the problems associated with that, if none of them are actually what the customers are using or have evaluated, is there a likelihood that we kind of look a little bit out of research? So how do you make sure that the things that you propose as potential solutions that they might be considering are actually very close to what they're doing or what they have tried before?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the point. That's the whole point of treating this like discovery, is that you're testing to make sure if you're ready, right? Like, again, the difference between you and IBM is that IBM doesn't need to test anything. They know how to sell a mainframe. They know who the buyer is without any questions. They know what the problem statements are. They know what the alternative solutions are. They know the key feature sets of a mainframe. And so the reps don't need to figure any of this stuff out. They just go execute. You're not in that situation. You have a bunch of hypotheses. And so your hypotheses might be right, but they might be dead wrong. And it's okay, right? Like, very few people are going to laugh you out of the room if you're wrong on this stuff. Now, there might be a dick out there who's really mean about it, but like most people aren't going to do that. But yeah, to your point, like there's a little bit of work on you to do some degree of research to go make sure that you're as close to the mark as you can get. But I wouldn't let that stop you. If you're really off the mark, it's going to take 1 to 2 phone calls to make it clear to you that you're way off the mark. You're not going to go through all 50 customers with a pretty deep misunderstanding of the market.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Alex.